Minnesota members and guests. That's an important comment today. Welcome to today's program, The Future of Work 2.0. This program is being recorded and will be available later on Engineering Alliance YouTube channel. That's new for us, YouTube channel. My name is Nick Willing. I am the chair. I work for Engineering Alliance Minnesota. I'm the chair for Engineering Alliance Minnesota. I work for Mitsubishi Electric Train. Thank you. Thank you for joining us in today's program. If you are new to Engineering Alliance programs or are returning, welcome. We are glad to have you join us today. Engineering Alliance Minnesota offers a variety of technical and professional programs each year, and we are in a process of expanding our offerings. Today is an example. We hope you will join us for upcoming programs. Professional development hours are free to all Engineering Alliance members. Additionally, we have a few communication committees. We have a new communications committee focused on supporting community building events such as today's program. My colleague, Carl Bewald, who is a member of Engineering Alliance Minnesota Board of Directors, is going to share a bit about this committee. We welcome you to join Carl's group. Carl?
Hey, hi, my name's Carl Bewald, and I'm a mechanical engineer, and I am on the new communications committee for Engineering Alliance. And the goal of this committee is to kind of help and build and broaden the Engineering Alliance community. And we're going to try to do that through engaging local companies and state organizations and try to form a working relationship for future events through Engineering Alliance. This event is part of that effort, and we're going to try to support the other committees by coordinating all the speakers and locations for those speakers and upcoming technical tours and other events. And we're going to manage the social media for Engineering Alliance as well. So the overall theme is to kind of help get the word out and keep that coordinated through social media and newsletters, email, etc. And it's a new committee, and we're looking for some help to do all that work. So if anybody's interested in helping out, contact somebody here at Engineering Alliance.
Okay, thank you, Carl.
Yep.
This screen shows the upcoming programs. Well, maybe. Well, it shows, oh, here we go. It shows the upcoming programs. I saw what she has there. In February is our environmental month. March is our energy month. April is our engineering in the field. And then May is about a new event we're trying to do. It's going to be our capstone event called STEM Meets the Challenge of the Pandemic. So let's talk about that a little bit. We invite you to share with your networks about the collaborative winter outreach series called STEM Meets the Challenge of the Pandemic. Engineering Alliance Minnesota is seeking presenting sponsors and STEM professionals to join us for an upcoming series of virtual experiences to take place this winter through spring about what STEM professionals are doing to address and moderate the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. This will be followed by a virtual summit, which I just talked about, in May. For more information about this program and how to get involved, please visit the Engineering Alliance website, or you can reach out to Katie Jameson, who introduced us. Wave, Katie. Oh, you can't see her. Reach out to Katie directly. With that, I'd like to introduce our Engineering Alliance Minnesota President, Matt Stockdale, who will introduce our speaker today. Matt?
Thank you, Nick. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon now, I guess it is. Before I introduce our speaker, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Participants today will receive certificates for PDHs after attendance is recorded in your online accounts. There's a catch to this. We do need to have first and last names in your on your profile, if you will. Phone numbers and only first names, things like that are problematic. If you do need to change that, if you hover over your window, your picture or whatever it is you have, up in the upper right corner, there'll be a box with 3 dots. And if you check that, there's a spot where you can rename yourself. So if you're looking for those PDHs, please make sure we have a first and last name there. It'll make life a heck of a lot easier for Julie and Katie as they're trying to sort this all out. So I'd also like to take a minute to thank our annual sponsors who make programs like this possible. Annual sponsorships for 21 are available. So if you would like to support our organization, we would greatly appreciate it. Please visit the Engineering Alliance website for details. Sponsors help make things like this happen. So Katie will get us the sponsor slide. Yeah, here on the slide, you can see, our current sponsors, and we'd like to special thanks to everybody there. So if you'd like to ask questions during today's program, you can do so via the chat feature or unmute and ask your question directly to the speaker. We'll also have a couple of audience polls today during the program. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our speaker, Sal Mondelli with the Bailey Group. Sal is an experienced board member and a former CEO of multiple companies. He's a certified executive coach and consultant with the Bailey Group and works with current and aspiring C-level executives on maximizing their leadership capabilities. Sal has served as a business analyst, project manager, program manager, and systems adoption consultant for over 30 years of his career. He is going to discuss with us today the future of work 2.0, providing insights on handling current and future leadership challenges in the era of COVID. So please welcome Sal.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Matt. Appreciate the kind introduction. Just to let people know, I think some people might have seen me before. 2 years ago, I was one of the presenters on a 2-day Young Engineers seminar that happened during a big snowstorm, as I recall. So that was a wonderful experience, and happy to be here with you today. Also, full disclosure, one of the boards I serve on is Braun Intertech in Bloomington. This is my 2nd year on that board, so I just thought people ought to know that. So we're going to talk here that Matt talked about the future of work and where we're going. So I want to let you know that this is really a compilation of what I'm hearing from clients that I work with, from the Bailey Group, the boards that I serve on, and a lot of reading that we all do, whether it's the Wall Street Journal or Harvard Business Review, et cetera, about what are the trends and things going forward. So really want to look at 3 ways today here, kind of break this presentation down to 3 different, where we've come from, where we're at right now, and where we're going post-COVID, because I think they're all very important. I think it's also important to understand that there's not a right or wrong answer to a lot of these things. It depends on you as an individual, the team that you work on, the company that you work for, and your personal situation. So I think what we started out with was, in a typical crisis response mode, is, hey, let's rally around the problem, all hands on deck. Everybody is excited. We're working from home. It's all new. And now we've kind of got to the point where I think we're living and working with the problem. But people are starting to get tired of it. And I think there's some things that we'll talk about on how to mitigate those. And then where we're going is it's evolving. And so there's going to be some different things on how we all work, how you manage, and how you work in teams. Now, other thing is, I'm a Navy guy, so it pains me to quote an Army general, but General Shinseki, the former Army Chief of Staff, I thought this really is relevant to a lot of things that we do in our life. It's you got to be, everything is changing, and it's a heck of a lot better than being irrelevant. And so I think that's an important overarching thing to think about. So I got a couple of slides here on where we've come from. And these are quotes actually from clients that I've had over the course of the last year. That's, the positive things will say, well, we don't need to be in an office anymore, right? The leadership team can be anywhere. As a matter of fact, we probably can get rid of the office and save that expense, which a lot of people say. When you get to the thing about working in the field, whether it's in engineering or others, it's even more important because you always had things that would you could injure yourself or be killed with, but now you have a different invisible problem with COVID, and that required even more discipline because, as you all know, you could be perfect at work, but people then go other places and bring things back in. One of the things that were really important is that everybody seemed to say they're more productive working from home, and a lot of it had to do with that quiet workspace. Like I said, except if you have kids at home and they're either toddlers or they need some help with schoolwork. And there have been two studies I saw. One came from Stanford, and one I just read the other day that said that people feel like about 30% of their productivity gains have happened because the fact that they're not in an office and they don't get interrupted, again, except for the kids. But 70% of that comes because you're working longer hours. And that can be problematic because it's virtually unsustainable. That is the dirty little secret of working from home, is that you feel like you're working 24 hours a day. You could go out and take a walk in the afternoon or go do some chores. But I used to work for IBM, and just as I was leaving, they sent everybody home and pretty much have started to bring those people back. So again, it's not a right or wrong. It's whatever your culture supports. And I think another thing is about expectations and boundaries. And I think boundaries need to be set on both sides. As long as you get your work done, I don't care what you're doing and when you're doing if you're a manager. But from the other side, my son happens to be a tax attorney. He works for an accounting firm, and both of his wife is a school teacher, so she has to be at school early. They have two young children. One can go to school from home. The other one goes to school, elementary school. So people at his work know from a certain time he has to take the younger one to school and pick her up in the afternoon. He's not available during those hours, and I think that becomes a pretty common place with people. And you got to do that. Make sure that people still have their lives to do, and they had a different set of rules before, and now we're working within the different confines. And the long-term effects, we just didn't know, 6 or 9 months ago, and we sure didn't know how long this was going to last. And we're still in that category, but at least we see some semblance of knowing where we're going to be heading in the future. So I'm going to ask you to use the chat function, and Katie will look at these questions and we can kind of talk about them. But so where we come from and where we're at now, again, this boundaries and knowing when to quit is really important, because I read an article about a CEO who said, I knew I had a problem when I sent out an email at midnight, and within 15 minutes, I got 2 responses. So obviously, boundaries have not been set there, and there's things that whether you're in management or not in management, you got to know when to set that correctly. Avoid late and early meetings. Shorter and fewer Zoom meetings are things that I'm hearing from people. And the one real positive is, from a management standpoint, is, hey, we're never going to have a snow day again, right? So we can. I heard that from a superintendent of schools too. So there's alternate work things here that will help us be more productive in the long term. And another thing was, we didn't know what the effects on the clients and customers were. Again, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. From everybody I've talked to, there's been minimal impact. Most people have been able to do exactly what they did before. They do it in just a different manner. I've got one client who's an investment banker, and his deal was he was traveling on planes all the time. And I used to tell him, can't you do this with electronic? Oh, no, our competitors are in front of our clients and prospects. We need to be there too. We found that wasn't really as important as possible. He's cut his travel down by 80%. Still traveling a little bit, but not as much. And mental health, it continues to be a problem. I got a couple of slides that we'll talk about that later. And I just saw this the other day on the news, and it talks about, can employers mandate that you take the vaccine? And there's two scenarios here. Again, first of all, it's a gray area, but the current vaccines are under emergency use only, and legally, you cannot be required to take a vaccine before you come to work under the emergency use provision. However, when those vaccines become fully licensed, what I heard was that a company can say, yes, you have to have that vaccine before we have you come to work. So just some food for thought as we move forward. So I don't know, Katie, have any questions come in?
Haven't seen any come in the chat yet, but go ahead and submit some if you have them, and
Yeah.
we will go ahead and ask them.
Okay. So I think we spent significant time on where we're going. And these are the areas, you're going to see a slide on each one of these, because I think they're all very important. And again, there's not a right or wrong here, but there's effects and things that you can do and things that you can look for on how to make this, as we get to the next stage and beyond, make it more effective. So the first thing is focus on the future. And what you want to do is avoid just maintenance mode of where we're at. You got to give people some hope that there's something that we're going to do as an organization. Otherwise, people get bored and you have lack of engagement. I'll give you one example. Again, I was in the Navy and I was on a ship. We deployed for 7 months and I ran a large division, and they were working pretty hard. We were a high tempo of operations, and we were in port, and we were always doing things. And so they were really working at high efficiency. And so I said to my boss, we're in port here in the Philippines. I'm just going to give them the day off. And I worked to give them the day off. And, you know, for 2 weeks after that, it was not the same. It was like, I kind of let myself down. And I wasn't as motivated as I was before. I got a little bit lazy. So you just got to make sure that people take short-term kinds of things to keep themselves mentally alert, and you don't have problems with mental health, but not too much. So people say, well, I'm doing the same thing I did 9 months ago, and there's a routine, and I got to get out of that routine and look for something different. And that is really setting the big, hairy, audacious goal and something in the future. I'll talk about that under resilience in the next slide. But I think engineers, that's a perfect place for you all to be, right? You all are problem solvers. So give engineers some problem to solve, something that needs collaboration between multiple groups in the organization, cross-functional teams, or whatever. Put some of those out. I think that will probably be the biggest thing you could help people in keeping mental health and keep them focused on where we're going, not where we're at or where we've been. Any ideas on any of that?
A couple questions and comments that have come in here. You know, there was one comment here that we may be looking at a mandate coming for vaccines, so that could affect some of these conversations. One person has said that they set up time blocks on their calendar to establish work boundaries. And then work from home is enticing, but some people have noticed a lack of collaborative innovation. Can you comment on how our intellectual pursuits have suffered due to the decrease in creativity?
That's a great question. And some people are able to use small groups or breakout groups on Zoom to do that intellectual kinds of discussion. But there's clearly letdown because you have to be much more intentional to have that. You can't just be walking down the hallway and pop in somebody's office now. You have to pick up the phone and call them or get on a Zoom call. And the best thing way I would do is if you're thinking about something, just pick up the phone or do it right now. Don't wait, or write it down, or as somebody else said, use your calendar to say, I haven't talked to Sally or Tom or Joe or or Sue in a while, I put things on my calendar and say, I'm going to talk to them, or we have something's due. It's not for 3 months. Let's start talking about it now. Let's start sharing ideas. So, but you have to be more intentional about it than, when we were at IBM, we always had people at customer locations for that exact reason. Customer had a problem, walked out their door, somebody was sitting in the bullpen. Hey, come on in, I want to talk to you about that. Hope that
Yeah,
answers
that's a
the
good way.
question.
That's a good way to frame it. The last comment related to that is wondering how the lack of water cooler conversation is going to impact the future productivity.
Yeah, I think productivity and innovation, I think, would be another way to look at that. Again, everybody's going to have to take this upon themselves. If you're waiting for somebody else to call you to ask your opinion, then maybe you should be the one calling and asking other people to participate. I've got an idea. What do you think about it? It might be the dumbest idea on the face of the earth, but if we get 2 or 3 people together, we can come up with a great idea. If I learned a long time ago that committed people can take a bad idea and figure out how to make it work, and uncommitted people can take a very good idea and you can just watch it auger in, because they'll find reasons why not to make it work. So be part of the former place. Figure out ways to make things work, or if you see something, because in the world we're in now with using technology, I'll mention that in the future here, is processes and procedures are going to need to change. So what you were used to doing it before, you're going to have a Post-it note now to remind you, or a reminder on your calendar, some way to automate that to do it, or it won't happen. And this is I tell you why I got this. My college roommate and I, this was before cell phones, because I'm a little older, actually a lot older, probably most of you, but we made this little pact that said, if you're thinking about each other right now, just pick up the phone and call. Otherwise, it'd be 6 months. And so I had that one of those conversations, which was a wonderful one, because he had some health problems, and that was a couple of months before he passed away. And I was really appreciative of the fact that we had that little pact between the two of us. So I hope you don't get into the point where somebody that you want to talk to passes away, but it's the same concept. Okay. Anything
Absolutely.
else?
That's a good point, Sal. Thank you. 2 comments here that are going together. Nick was saying that screen share works great for showing and sharing ideas when working remotely. And then Matt also commented, but the napkin sketch is difficult. So to do with, network issues, or you have screaming kids in the background, but think of all the ideas that have come forward and taken place because somebody scribbled an idea on a napkin.
And I don't remember the name of one. There are at least 2 electronic whiteboards. One's called, I think, Vivo. I'll look, I have them written down somewhere. I haven't used them, but I know some of my colleagues have used them to do team development, where you can, it's essentially an electronic thing, but you can put a Post-it note up, you can have 5 or 6 people or multiple people and do this. So there are some electronic ways to do that, to have that collaborative effort, if it worked. I'll send Katie those when I send the slides about those. That's a great example.
Yeah,
And I don't think that existed before a year ago.
No, there's so much innovation that's taking place there. Wesley is interested in learning more about strategies to adopt new methods of communication. For example, less email, more use of Slack or Teams or other things that can help increase communication and a sense of belonging and inclusion.
Let me hold that for a second, because I got a slide in the future that we can talk on that.
Great, thank you.
Great questions. Thank you. Let's see. This is a big one here, because I don't know how you are, but I mean, my wife and we went to high school together. We've been married for a long time. And during the summer, it was great. Right? We took walks outside. Now we try to go to the mall a couple, 3 times a week. But she was used to seeing people outside, and it's a lot more difficult now. And so you got to be able to combat that. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the Stockdale Paradox. Admiral Stockdale was the most senior POW in Vietnam, a Navy admiral, and he did a lot of speeches and writing afterwards. And he talked about how did people survive for extended periods of time in a situation where they didn't know where the end point was going to be? And this is what he said: you have to have hope for the future while you're still dealing with the harsh realities of the present situation. And they were in a situation where you can't be saying, I'm going to be out of this by next Tuesday or next year or Christmas or my birthday or my anniversary, because if those days come and go and it doesn't happen, now all of a sudden you're despondent and depressed. So you just have to say, when I get out, here's what I'm going to do. When I get out, here's the first person I'm going to talk to. When I get out, here's the first thing I want to eat or drink. And that's a little bit like we're out here today is we at least know with the vaccines and herd immunity that there will be some things at the end of this, but we just don't know whether, the odds would be it's probably late summer before we get to the point where it's as close to as normal. But I don't know about you, I'm not ready, and I love live performances at jazz clubs and things like that. I'm not ready to go do that. I'm not ready to go back to a movie. But at least at some point we'll be able to do that. And I just gave you some ideas here on how you can look at these things in addition to that Stockdale Paradox. The Marines are very big on these three sort of things: adapt, improvise, overcome. I don't have a situation that I can't find a way out of. I can find something positive in it and something that will make it get better. And again, we talked about growth. Think about the future. And the Apollo 13 example. Failure is not an option. We have 3 astronauts that are a long, long way from Earth, and we have to figure out a way to get them back safely. And this last one here, this may be controversial, but I also read about POWs, but I just talked to somebody recently that one of their relatives had COVID. And this is the tough love. It's in the case of the COVID patient, it said, I had this uncle and he was despondent. He looked terrible. And what we did an intervention with him on a Zoom platform or whatever, and told him essentially, get his act together. Go fight this. You can beat this. And he said the next day, he was a different person. Now, was that going to work for everybody? Probably not. We don't know the power of the mind. And we know it's just a fraction of it. I'm no psychologist. But the same thing in POWs, people would say, a guy would get depressed and say, I can't eat rice anymore. And they jack him up. I mean, and just say, this is not an option for you. We're not done with you. We need you. Just some way to get them back into a mindset of, I'm going to deal with the future. I'm going to deal with the present and not give up. Because if you give up, that leads to this boredom and depression. And that's just not a place that you want anybody to go. Interested in people's thoughts about any of that.
You can drop your comments in the chat and I will read them to everyone.
Yeah, and I don't want to dwell on this too much, but these things are key. That's about thinking about the future state, thinking about positivity, and in addition to, hey, we got to do these kind of things today, but we got to do these things today because it's going to help us get where we need to go in the future. Okay, well, I'll move on here, and Katie, if something comes up, you just kind of let me know. So collaboration, we talked a little bit how the challenge here is on collaboration, and there's a couple of things to do. I just read a recent article in last week's Wall Street Journal that said management in the future, they said that 70% of the things that this is a hypothesis, that managers do today will be either automated or handled by artificial intelligence. A lot of the time cards, approval of vacations, a bunch of things like that, which leaves a lot more time for people to interact. And we see a lot more things about managers being coaches now. I'll talk a little bit about the environment in the next slide, but you got to build trust with people. Well, how do you do that? Well, you build that from a manager to the team, the team to the individual, and kind of a circular deal there. So we all trust each other. We know we have each other's backs. If you get into a situation where I have children at home and somebody's sick, or I have a parent who's in the hospital, or a parent who passed away, or something like that, you got to be able to deal with that and say, we're going to rally around and we're going to pick up the slack for those. From a purely office environment standpoint, again, people were pretty much saying, unless it's absolutely mandatory, we were going to use some kind of a hybrid model where certain people need to be in the office, certain functions need to be in the office at all times. And we're going to say some people are going to be in for 2 days a week, and then another part of the team is going to be in for another 2 days a week or 3 days a week. So people are kind of trading off, and there'll be much more, look like more collaborative workspaces than individual offices and cubes. And that's just a way that you can kind of get to a different state, and again, not go back to the way it was, because that's probably not the environment. Now, some of you may remember back in the 80s, there were open classrooms where they were divided by bookshelves and things like that. That would prove to be not as effective. But I think what you see in the offices, if you look at Silicon Valley, there's a lot more of those large technology companies that have places where people can gather in groups of 2, 3, and 4, whether it's in a coffee area or stand-up desks or small little conference rooms, versus everybody's got an office or a cube and we have 3 different big conference rooms. And I think you're going to see a lot more of this small team orientation. Is I work for team A for the next months or years, and then I'm going to move over to work for team B. So I kind of move around in my current company, and I have a functional expertise, but I work with people with different functional expertise. Again, that goes back to solving those problems. And I think if you read anything about millennials, that's the way millennials like to operate. They like to operate with a group of people who solve a problem and learn something. I learn something from other people, and then we kind of move on.
One comment that came in here quickly, if we have just a second.
Yeah.
Paul noted that many employers have access to great mental health resources. So an encouragement not to be shy to use those. They are available for people to use.
Yep, absolutely. You have employee assistance programs. That's what my last point will be. Lean on your HR staff and employee assistance programs, and don't feel shy about making a call to that. There are people on the other end of the line can help you. And I know plenty of people that have worked for me in the past have said how it's been invaluable, whether we're going through a personal crisis or some kind of a health initiative or something like that. So what's the role of management as we move forward, especially in this work from home environment? And it's not, if you were a manager that tried to control your people and micromanage, that never really worked, but it's certainly not going to work in this work from home or hybrid environment. It's all about managing the work and the results and not the people. And so it's more about, here's my expectations, here's the deadline, here's the accountability, and have a very open and honest communication. Somebody asked about communication earlier, and that's going to be very key on how we do this. Manager is going to be somebody who's more empathetic about personal situations. I just read another, talking about understanding the situation, and about how can you do this? Well, there's a couple ways to do this. There's maintaining a daily routine. Right, if you don't have a meeting until 10 o'clock, well, don't be rolling out of bed at 9:45. Get up at your normal time. I got to admit, I don't wear a shirt with a collar every day. I am wearing today. If I meet with a new prospect, I don't wear a tie. I feel bad for my dry cleaner because I have not worn a pair of dress slacks since last February. It's jeans, or in the summer it was shorts or a pair of sweatpants. But that's an unintended consequence. But you got to make another thing about being empathetic is make some phone calls to the people that work for you for no reason other than just to check in to see how they're doing. There's no agenda. I'm not calling to ask about a project. I'm not calling to ask you to do anything. I just want to see how you personally doing. How's the family doing? It's a different way of doing management by walking around. You can't see the picture on somebody's desk of their kids or dog or spouse or grandchildren to ask about. So you have to be, again, more intentional about doing that. And you have to give people more autonomy, because the natural tendency is going to be back. Well, I can't see you. I don't know what you're doing. I need an update. People feel that if you do that, then you don't trust them. And it goes back to, you need to have a trust between the people that make all this work. And so here's just a couple of suggestions about being in coaching. Is listening and asking more questions about, what can I help you? What obstacles can I help get out of your way? How can I make things more streamlined? Do you have too many things to do? Can I get you some help to do that? Or et cetera. And then also personal development. Are there some seminars you can go to? Or there's some online classes that you can take? Things like that. Other ideas I've seen for teams is, there's one very unique one. It's no email Fridays. I don't know how that works, but so it's just, don't expect to get an email from your boss asking you to do some things. We got everything done in the first 4 days of the week. Or no emails or texting before or after certain hours. I've heard of, the only time we've been together at the Bailey Group was last July. There's a park right across from our office in Golden Valley. We all brought beach chairs. We had box lunches sent in, and we all sat around and had a nice couple-hour conversation. I've heard of some people doing that in the wintertime, a lot shorter time frame, in a park or some outside location. Others have done lunches where they've either sent them gift cards or ordered box lunches sent to their house, things like that. Just some unique ways to keep that conversation going, but do it in a safe manner. I think Katie's another question.
It did, yeah. Sorry, I wasn't unmuting fast enough there. So this suggestion is great. Somebody invested, that Lindsay said she invested in a stand-up desk at home. So without trips to the break room or the printer or walking between meetings, it was a lot more sitting, and this was a way to kind of change that up a little bit. So she set it on alarm on her phone to remind herself to stand up 3 times a day for an hour, and that's been very helpful.
Oh, that's a terrific idea. I worked for a person in the Navy who had a stand-up desk. I always wanted to get one, and I never did. But I had some modular furniture one time. I could put the desktop up a little higher, and I think there's something like 50 or 60% less strain on your lower back if you're standing up versus sitting down. I invested in a high quality chair. And this is not an advertisement, it's just what I did. There's a place called Podani's in St. Louis Park where they have new and used office furniture. And I went in there, they probably have 3 dozen different kinds of chairs. I just went around, sat in different ones until I found one I liked. While I was paying for it, a guy in the back put it together and threw it in my backseat of my car. And it's terrific. I think I paid like $200. You can spend thousands of dollars on a high quality chair. Whatever you spend, it will put big dividends. Great idea. So leadership development, personal development, you got to really, again, I talked about a little bit about when you talk to the people for no other reason, just to check in, look for those warning signs. If you're on a Zoom call, look for facial expressions. In coaching, we always look for facial expressions, changes in their tone. Do they look down? Are they not looking in the eye? And ask a few things about how the rest of the family's doing, or if they don't have a family, what are you doing outside of work? What are you doing to get out? I mean, just some ideas. It's not really trying to get into their personal life. It's trying to figure out how you can help them cope with this situation that we're in. So technology it's not an end all be all. I spent a long time in technology, worked for IBM for a long time and other small companies. It's a means to an end. It's not an end unto itself. So you really need to understand that, and how to use it and how not to use it. Again, we were talking early on. I like Zoom versus Teams, because Teams, my face is only some little thing down in the right hand corner, and I can't see how I'm reacting to a meeting. It was in one a couple of months ago, and my boss said, "Well, Sal obviously doesn't like that idea," and I didn't realize I was making a face like, "Well, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of," but I was. So I like Zoom, so at least I can see myself. But you got to be aware of those kinds of things, because that's what people are looking. That's what people are looking for. And I mentioned earlier, just because you have technology, it just means the way you operate, and you can't walk down the hall anymore. You have to figure out how these things interact to get the most out of it. Go ahead, Katie.
A question that came in here. What advice do you have for employees who have a drop in performance due to the forced work from home? There is a real risk of being fired due to this, and there are some who absolutely thrive in an office environment, due to the distractions and the other issues that arise at home.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first and foremost, you got to be honest with yourself and say, why is that happening? What is it about me that I like being in the office? And then have a very frank discussion with the person that you work for, and say, look, this does not work as well for me. Here's the environment I thrive in. I want to go back to the office. And I have a lot of clients that say people absolutely want to do that. I'm sure, are people on this call that say, I know there's a risk to going back in the office, but I'm willing to take that risk as long as I wear a mask and wash my hands, and people understand that around me. So I think, again, go back and have that conversation with yourself and also with your boss, and figure out what is it we can do so I could be as productive as I was before, because I'm not that way today. And I think it's a challenge, but I think hopefully your boss will appreciate that and come up with some ideas on how to mitigate that. So culture, again, this is a little bit about what we just talked about. There's some companies where people are saying you got to come back to the office unless you have a certain situation, right? Medical, you're taking care of somebody, you have young children at home, something like that. And that could be a challenge, but they'll always be able to make a exception for those kinds of things. And others say nobody's coming back to the office. At the Baylor Group, we will meet with clients if they want to in the office. I've met with one, and we're at the end of a conference room table, and we both wore masks, and it was an hour and a half meeting, and it went just fine. But as long as we were smart about it, I think we can do that. So it's, how do you measure the engagement of the people when you're working remotely? So I'm interested if you have any thoughts about how to do this. Again, people I know are doing pulse surveys. They're doing those check-ins with people. They're doing cross-functional teams to say, well, how, you worked with these other 3 people, how are they doing? Just so that kind of people keep that communication, again, open and honest communication, because otherwise it starts to fester, and you're going to have a retention problem that you didn't know you didn't have a chance to fix because somebody didn't tell you about it. And we talked a little bit earlier about how that safe environment. I can't stress enough, use the HR staff. They are trying to stay on top of this. Everyone I know, whether it's companies I work with or boards I sit on, this is a high priority in companies to make sure that there's a safe environment for everybody. I'm on a trucking company board, and that was a big problem, that people working on on the loading docks, and some people got sick, and they found out, well, they weren't adhering to the protocols, and so that's something that you have to make sure that stays in place. But if you do have a problem, whether you're you don't feel safe, or the mental health the stress is getting to you, use that employee assistance program.
Okay, we have another comment here if you have a second for it.
Yeah.
Can you comment on how workflow processes and procedures might need to change?
Well, yeah, again, it depends on if you're used to electronic workflow. I mean, there's a lot of electronic workflow platforms where you could essentially take a document, and it's got to move through 3 levels of approval, and you do it all electronically. Some companies are in that situation. Most are not, right? Most are, I sign something, then I hand it to somebody else, and it sits in their inbox and moves around. I don't know if you use DocuSign. We use DocuSign a lot in dealing with our clients for customers for getting contracts signed. So it's all a matter of, to get for whatever process from point A to point B, what are the steps, and how can I handle those now, because people are working from home. I can't walk down the hall. We know that's a given. I can't put it in somebody's inbox unless it's electronic. How do I monitor where it's at? Those kinds of things. So hope that answered the question. Okay. And this is the last slide, so again, we can open it up. Any other questions you have about anything we've talked about here today. But I think in the future, we talked about that. Think about where we're going to be, not right now, but beyond 2021, because this is not the only crisis we're likely going to face. There was a downturn in 2008, 2009, right? There's this pandemic. There's going to be a lot of things that happen, and we just have to be cognizant of what the things that we must do, and how do we respond to that. And I like the entrepreneur. I worked at a number of small technology companies, and entrepreneurs are, they probably epitomize the word pivot before it became fashionable. But everybody thinks of an entrepreneur as somebody that has an idea and bets all their chips on red or black on the roulette table and goes for it. But it's not true. They make really risk-based decisions that say, the risk is worth what I believe the reward is. But they very quickly assess, well, this didn't work. I need to try something else. And it's fail quickly would be another way to describe that, because you don't want to go down a path and put a lot of human capital and money into something that doesn't work out. And the people, a lot of boards I'm on, we don't talk enough about risk assessments, because there are risks to everything that we do, positive, that can be, you can't succeed if you don't take some risk, but they have to be calculated risks, and be able to make those changes, because the situation that you thought was, when you made that decision a day, a week, or a month ago, it changed for whatever reason. So we got to get out of that as quickly as possible. I've got one client who has it's a holding company for medtech device makers. There's seven different firms, and they very early, the CEO's mantra was never waste a good crisis. They did a lot of, in addition to the COVID protocols early on, they looked at which businesses they could exit. They looked at which businesses they could cut staff for, and they did all that in the first month to month and a half. And then when the rebound happened for them 6 weeks later, they were really hitting on all cylinders. They found they could be as productive as they were before with 30% less people. So they were able to take that money and pour it back into capital expenditures and things. And when I talked to him just a couple of weeks ago, he said, some of my competitors are just doing the things now that we did last March, because they're public companies and they have to disclose that kind of stuff. So that's just an example of being able to see where you need to go and know I need to do more than I think I need to do. If you look at why is Congress doing all these stimulus packages, very early on, last February or March, Neil Kashkari, who's the president of the Minneapolis Federal Reserve Bank, he was the guy that did TARP back in the Bush and Obama administrations for the banks. And he said if we learned anything from the 2008, 2009 crisis, it was we didn't do enough soon enough. He said, so we're going to keep pumping money into the economy to keep it as afloat because it's a heck of a lot better than doing unemployment and watching businesses go down the tubes. So that's not a political statement. That's more of an economic statement. So that's all I have. Katie, if we have any other questions or comments or.
Yes, sorry, my video wasn't coming there. So add them in the chat, or you can unmute and ask Sal directly. The question that came in the last portion here was, are employers required to advise you they are monitoring your work on your PC?
Well, that's a pre-COVID kind of thing too. To be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not gonna. That probably is more a legal and privacy thing, but I'm just not gonna.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I have
Yeah,
an
I don't
opinion,
know
but
the
I'm not
answer
sure
either.
it's valid. I'm not gonna try to answer that. I'm sorry.
And maybe one of our attendees knows as well. But we have just a few minutes left here, so please type in your comments, or you can unmute yourself and ask Sal your question or comments or ideas you'd like to share with others.
Yeah, or if there's anything that you hoped would have been covered that I didn't cover. We should have the Jeopardy music for Final Jeopardy.
Right. Now, I always like to give people a second to
Sure, yeah. We'll take
unmute
as much
themselves.
time as you need.
I've got a question. So I have found that working from home and working remotely has definitely highlighted some generational differences in technology and approach. Is there any advice or thoughts you have on, engaging people who are, maybe haven't been working online their whole careers, and how to help get them involved in this? Because I find that it's the senior engineers that I really kind of have to drag into collaborating online versus some of the younger engineers who are more apt to do it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Again, I spend a lot of time in technology, but I still ask my kids, well, how do I do this on I just got an iPhone. I always had an Android. I'm still trying to figure out some of the ways to make that work. So I think a couple of things I would suggest. One is model that behavior. Say, hey, look, I didn't understand this either. Here's what I found out about it. Or enlist the technology department. Say, could you help Sal? Sal seems to not kind of get this. Or instead of signaling Sal out, it's saying, we have the technology department is going to do a presentation to our group about here's the 3 things that we need to be able to understand about the technology that we're using in our particular firm. Just so, and then afterwards, anybody, feel free. I already talked to the technology department, so I knew I needed to have some help, but feel free to do that, because we're going to be doing this as we go forward, and we don't want anybody to fall behind. And that way it gives a sense of, hey, we're all in this together. And I'm not really singling out Sal just because he's not as tech savvy as the rest of us, because it will become readily apparent, unfortunately.
Those are good points. Thank you. Additional questions or comments?
Anybody?
Well, you can send them, again, if you think of them afterwards, send them to Katie and Katie can forward them to me and I'm happy to answer that.
Super.
Yes, you can include in the survey or send them directly and we can include them in there.
Great. Thanks,
Well,
everybody. I really enjoyed time together. Thank you for your thoughtful questions and comments. Really appreciated it. And look forward to the next time we get together.
All right. We'll kind of wrap things up. Thanks a lot, Sal. Really appreciate your time and your wisdom. Thanks to our sponsors for helping us put this all together. And thanks to everybody for your time. For anybody that might have come on late, it looks like most everybody has their names in their profile here. But if you don't have your name, if you have some sort of abbreviation or something like that, and you do need credit for this hour, please modify that right away so that Katie and Julie can figure out who's who. Some of the standards, if you will, are so cryptic that there's just no way. So if they're close and obvious, that's one thing. But if it's a phone number, we're kind of out of luck. So please make sure that you're clear, and we'll get those out. But again, thanks to everybody, and we'll see you next time. Stay healthy and warm.